Ultimately, I haven't really found a situation in our capitalist society where people will just do the right thing unless there is a financial motive behind it. So I think it is really important for sustainability companies to figure out how can someone bring this to their boss and say this makes financial sense, a lot of financial sense for me to adopt. It comes down to understanding what the pain point is of the customer. And right now it's really challenging for the packer to know which apples can store and which apples can't store. And as a result, they have a lot of waste and inefficiency in their decision-making process. And I think getting someone interested in the technology comes down to understanding what the pain point is and then being able to communicate how exactly we're making their life easier and better. I think super high burn is not always the right answer, especially when we're talking about sustainability companies. Like the whole point of what we are all trying to build is something that can survive and exist for a long time.
Katherine, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Strella BioTech? What is it you're solving for?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm Katherine. I'm the CEO and founder of Strella. What we do at Strella is we predict the shelf life of different types of produce using a sensor technology that we developed. And then we use that data in multiple places across the supply chain to make better decisions. So our goal is to reduce food waste and increase the quality of produce that we eat.
Let's start with the origin then. Like, what is it that pulled you into food waste? What did those first steps look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was in school and I was on a PhD track for neuroscience, but something wasn't really striking my fancy about going and doing more school. And so started reading about things and learning about anything that I thought was interesting. And I stumbled across the fact that 40% of food is wasted before it's consumed. That's kind of one of the most ridiculous things I've heard even to date. That was swiftly followed by a wave of guilt because I didn't know where my food came from. And so started going to grocery stores and distribution centers and packing houses and just learning about where my food comes from. And that giant rabbit hole eventually led to the creation of the company.
I mean, 40% is wild. Why do you think that stat hasn't driven more like innovation in the space until recently?
I think it's just a very difficult topic. First of all, there's just a lot of different supply chain players. And so it's not like there's one particular place or thing that's happening to create that. So it's just a complicated problem. I think on top of that, nobody wants food waste to happen, right? No farmer wants to throw away their hard-earned crop. And so I think people are trying, but the big thing is just that we have a pretty archaic supply chain today. And so we need to introduce new technologies and method for building resiliency in the 21st century.
You're solving a problem that most people don't even realize exists. How do you go about approaching educating a market that isn't already looking for a solution?
I think it comes down to understanding what the pain point is of the customer. So, for example, one group of customers that we work with heavily are apple and pear packers. So packers, they store apples for up to a year before they go to a grocery store. And right now it's really challenging for the packer to know which apples can store and which apples can't store. And as a result, they have a lot of waste and inefficiency in their decision-making process. And so what we do is we utilize our sensor technology to help them make better inventory decisions at the packing house. And I think getting someone interested in the technology comes down to understanding what the pain point is and then being able to communicate how exactly we're making their life easier and better.
A year is wild to me. I had no idea about that stat. Let's speak about when the company first started then, like that early traction. Obviously, getting that early traction, going from 0 to 1 isn't an easy thing. And you said your early traction came from driving to your first clients, actually going to meet them in person. What do you think made that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big problem, but trying to break it down into very actionable bite-sized pieces that you can accomplish on a daily basis. So when I heard about apples being stored for a year and how it's a giant black box of like deciding what to do, I figured that would be a good initial market to get into for the use of our technology. And then from there, it's, finding like who the major players are, learning from them, building a relationship with them over time, and driving to them personally, of course, just like I still do today with a very significant majority of my customers.
Well, I was just about to ask then, if you had to build it again, would you do it any differently? It sounds like you wouldn't
Yeah.
because you're still doing it, or maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I've just like made every freaking mistake in the book, like this is my first company. And so I would say I've been pretty inefficient and, like just didn't know how to do a lot of things. So I think if I was starting again, I would just leverage the experience I have. But there's something very beautiful about being totally naive and having like that beginner's mind when approaching a problem too.
So you've previously said that you have a really small total addressable market. Like you've only got a few hundred potential customers globally. And so you obviously must have to think about growth really differently from like a typical software or like CPG business. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So we are very much enterprise B2B. So a lot of food in general is pretty consolidated into pretty large players. And so our sales motion is very personal, high touch, very old fashioned. So yeah, we meet people in person, we build relationships over time. We even, in our industry, it's not totally crazy to not even sign a contract, but just have a handshake agreement with someone. And it always works. Like we've never been burnt by that. So I would say it's just like kind of a very personal, very high touch kind of a sale.
So you've made the leap from producers into retail, and the sales motion must change a lot with that. How has it evolved? Does that kind of more stakeholders get involved? There's more opinions in there. How has the way that you do sales changed?
Yeah, retail is a lot more corporate than working with upstream players. So there's a lot more like trial construction, like determining how to demonstrate our KPIs and things like that. So it's definitely almost an entirely different motion from working with other groups in the supply chain. And so we have a team that focuses specifically on retail and a team that focuses specifically on packing segments.
Are there any moments that almost made you quit the business?
Yeah, for sure. I do really love my job like 99.99% of the time. But certainly it can get pretty challenging at times. I think the big ones are just like learning how to keep your mental and physical health in check while doing everything. And so I think the hardest moments I've had when I just let that go and had to kind of climb out of that while still running the business.
You mentioned before that your sales team is really specialized and expensive. What's the biggest challenge in getting new reps ramped, getting them productive, getting them to work?
I think first of all, we have a lot of knowledge. Like, for example, our reps need to know how to ripen bananas and understand the banana ripening process. So that certainly takes a little bit of time. And then I think the other one is just making sure that we have someone who is capable of building that long-term relationship and being that person who a banana ripener can trust, or a QA person can trust, or a VP can trust with all of their specific needs. And so I think that one ultimately just comes down to the person themselves and their capacity to do that kind of work.
Tell me a bit more about the banana ripening. Do you not just leave it on the counter?
Yeah, for sure. So when you go to the grocery store, the bananas are kind of all over the place, right? And avocados too, right? Sometimes they're too unripe, sometimes they're super ripe. And the way that the banana supply chain works is bananas are brought green, so underripe, to a retailer distribution center. And then they are placed into ripening rooms where they are ripened. So there's a whole job called a banana ripener or an avocado ripener. And it's this person's job to get those bananas from green to yellow. But right now, it's very much an art, not a science. So they'll peel the banana, look at how the latex flows, kind of see how starchy it is. And like all these qualitative metrics are used by the human to figure out how to ripen that banana properly. But it requires a ton of training and experience, and it's just very difficult to scale. And so what we do is we place our sensor technology in these banana ripening rooms, and we're listening to the bananas ripening. So they're respiring and producing ethylene. And then we plug that data into a machine learning model, which automatically controls the ripening process based on how the bananas are reacting to their conditions. And so we take all the art out of banana ripening, automate it, and turn it into a science.
What's the biggest misconception people have when you first try and pitch Strella?
I think there's like a couple of misconceptions, like in the market in general, around food waste. So that's usually one thing, is like, for one, it's kind of a little politicized. I think there's just like a lot of finger pointing around, like, you're doing this wrong or you're doing that wrong. And so sometimes just even bringing up the topic of waste can be like a little bit challenging. I think another one is when you're a technology company coming into a space, people assume that you're trying to sell like a silver bullet solution or to say, hey, I'm doing this better than you. But oftentimes it's really a partnership, right? Like we are trying to help someone make their life or job easier, but they have a ton of knowledge. So, for example, a lot of the packers we work with, they can smell and feel when apples are ready. And that is very true and very accurate. They've been doing it for 40 plus years. And so it's not about us like saying that they're doing something incorrectly. It's just, hey, like you want to pass this business on to the next generation, or maybe you want to see your kids during the harvest period, and we're here to help like support that.
Have you ever tried a campaign or like a narrative that totally fell flat?
Well, we've made a ton of like pricing mistakes. So when you go to business school, which I didn't, but when you read the business school textbooks, it'll say something like take like the ROI that you create, right? And then a third of that should be your pricing. So for example, in my first year, that's what I did. I was like, I save a customer X dollars, and I'm going to take a third of that as my price so that they get 3X ROI. That the mistake that I made there was it was a brand new product and the customers had no idea like whether it worked or not. And so I didn't create that discount for like first year, first time opportunities. And so that totally fell flat. And I had to go back to my customers and be like, look, I screwed up on pricing. Like it's my first year doing this. Sorry about that.
And then what do you feel is like working best in terms of educating the market right now then? Because a lot of sustainability founders I speak to have this problem where it's really difficult to get things into ROI terms or terms that like business leaders can understand. So what's working well for you right now?
Well, that's why I love the food waste space in general, is because it's very not profitable and very bad for a business to have waste. And so we aren't really fighting the uphill battle on the ROI side as much as like a sustainability offering that doesn't have that. So we honestly, a lot of the time, do not even discuss sustainability with our customers or investors. That's kind of something that I do for myself. Is the reason I picked this particular problem. But for the most part, we just say we reduce shrink or we help with labor efficiency. And so we have very specific, like targeted metrics around how that pops up on the customer's P&L.
Yeah, you know what? That's such a good point for people to take in listening to this or watching it is it's all about the language that your customers use and the way that they look at things rather than feeling like you know best because you know your product's better. Like it's all about putting it into their words. So it's yeah, rewatch that if you're watching or listening. It's a really important point. So obviously there's lots of AI stuff going around now, lots of like automations and agents and all that kind of stuff. But are there any parts of the sales journey you've been able to automate or templatize, or is it still like one to one the whole way through?
For the most part, it's just, yeah, it's one to one, like very high touch, just given the nature of our customers. I mean, we do some like automated marketing and campaigning and stuff like that. So we do have like some kind of like running in the background sales processes that are automated, but for the most part, like, yeah, I mean, we're trying to catch like 100 very specific people. So we're pretty targeted. I think on the sustainability piece too, ultimately, I haven't really found a situation in our capitalist society where people will just do the right thing unless there is a financial motive behind it. And so I think it is really important for sustainability companies to figure out how can someone bring this to their boss and say this makes financial sense, a lot of financial sense for me to adopt.
Well, that's also the big thing as well, right? Like even with sustainability officers, things like that, they still have to justify their work to the bosses, to the board, to the CEO. And like all they care about are growing the business, reducing risk, or paying out to shareholders. Everything that you do, whether it's in like not just sustainability, but HR or ops or finance, whatever it might be, has to feed back to that. And I think you're mostly right, as much as I hate to admit it. Like, we live in a capitalist world and society, and money matters. As much as we would love people to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, it's rare.
Yeah, for sure. But I also think that sustainability is oftentimes like an efficiency or optimization kind of game. Like waste is a good example of that. And so I think there are I would argue that actually most sustainability companies do have that double bottom line impact. It's just, like you said, how to position it, how to message it properly, and be able to communicate that value to the customer.
Tell me a bit more about your philosophy around sustainability then, because we spoke a little bit about this in our previous call.
Yeah, I think the big thing is to figure out how to make it as actionable as possible, right? If you're trying to make some kind of sustainable impact, then you have to figure out like what's the fastest way to get there. How do I make adoption easy? And so for my business, a lot of it comes down to being able to make a very significant business impact that is kind of separate from the sustainability piece altogether, that is very justifiable and needed just outside of the goodwill and good things that happen when you don't throw away bananas.
What does sustainability mean to you, if you had to define it?
It means like the most efficient path, I would say. Sustainability to me means something that can exist in perpetuity without, using up the resources required to run the cycle in the first place.
Okay, going back to the sales part. So we're talking about anything you've managed to automate or templatize. I know that not yet. What's something you wish you could do at scale when it comes to sales, but you can't?
I think like top of funnel is always something that we're trying to work on because that's like the least, it's the moment when we have the smallest amount of touch with the customer. So we're just trying to bring them into the door and establish that first point of contact. And so I think understanding how to bring people into our funnel at the very beginning is something that I'd like to work on automating and making more efficient.
What's a piece of conventional wisdom about startup growth that you think is just complete nonsense?
I think super high burn is not always the right answer, especially when we're talking about sustainability companies. Like the whole point of what we are all trying to build is something that can survive and exist for a long time. And so I don't necessarily think that the super traditional, like raise $20 million and then burn it in 8 months approach is one that works super well for the challenges that we are trying to solve. And so I think that can be a huge hurdle in playing in the venture capital space.
Okay, real quick. If you're a sustainability founder and growth feels stuck, this part is for you. You're doing between 700K to 3 million in revenue. You've built something amazing, but growing it is just exhausting. Every lead comes from a referral, every deal depends on you, and every time you try to scale, something breaks. Your pipeline, your sanity, or even worse, your impact. The problem is you are too close to see the real issues. You're trying to read the label from inside the bottle. That is exactly what we help you with at Plucky Bamboo. We work with planet-first B2B companies to find and fix the hidden bottlenecks that quietly block their growth, whether that's unclear positioning, weak lead flow, or a sales process that just doesn't convert. First, we uncover what's broken. Then, if it makes sense, we build the systems to fix it, so you can scale your impact without burning out. We've done this for companies like Blue Banyan and Scrap, and after hundreds of conversations with sustainability founders and CEOs, I know where the cracks show up when you start to grow. So if you're ready to find and fix what's holding back your growth and impact, visit pluckybamboo.com to see how we can help. Okay, back to the episode. Is there any advice you hear from other founders that just makes you cringe a bit?
Well, one to the sustainability piece a little bit thing is around how to treat team members that I see a lot. So I think there's this like misconception in Silicon Valley that you kind of have to be an asshole in order to make things work, right? Like we have some very famous CEOs who like have made their whole name around just, kind of mistreating people and stuff like that, or creating like terror in the workplace. And I think that's very, very silly. I think a lot of the times those people succeeded in spite of themselves. And so I think a really big component of team building for me is making sure that everyone's happy when they go to work every day. And I believe in work-life balance too, maybe not for C-level folks, maybe not for founders and stuff, but for team members, absolutely, it's really important. And even for founders, like you find inspiration in the most unlikely places, like going to a museum, like sitting by the water and thinking a little bit can be just so productive at the end of the day. And so I'm pretty big on the balance thing, especially when it takes 8 years to exit on average. So it's not really like the shortest process.
Have you got any advice on how people can help their team members be happy, make it a nice place to work?
I think it's like a bunch of different pieces. The first one I think is just checking your ego at the door. So the way that I look at my team is every single one of us serves a specific function in the project that we are working on. And so we are all trying to find the best solution. And so there shouldn't be any like, I'm right, you're wrong. It's we're trying to find the right answer or the best answer at the time. So that's a really big piece of it. Um, Maintaining like intellectual openness and curiosity kind of goes hand in hand with that as well. So being able to speak your mind and having everyone on the team feel comfortable speaking their mind so that we can arrive at the best solution is really important as well. And then I think just like treating each other like adults. We do work harder than most people and we work on harder things than most people. And, when I say I have balance in my life, I would say that most normal people would probably disagree with that state. But understanding that, we are doing a difficult thing, but trying to find the pleasure and joy of working on the difficult thing on a daily basis.
Have you ever read Drive by Daniel Pink, I think? It's on my bookshelf somewhere.
Oh, I've heard of
Yeah.
it, but I haven't read it.
Because that talks a lot about the different kinds of work that people do and the way that they should be incentivized to do so. So there's some things that are like just rote tasks that you do every day. I guess a lot of that is being taken by AI now, but those kind of people deal best with higher rewards for the work that they do. So like getting paid more, things like that. But people that are in the more knowledge space or like creative work, things like that, work a lot better with autonomy because they then have the responsibility and often they have more drive because they're given awards or they have acknowledgement from their peers and stuff like that.
I think that's also one of the benefits of, again, this is my first company, so not necessarily having a ton of managerial chops. I usually hire people and I'm like, what, it's your job to figure it out, like if you're the first data science hire that I have, like we're figuring this out together. And so I think for some people, they hate that. It's definitely like a binomial distribution. Like some people that freaks them out. Other people, they thrive in those types of environments.
It doesn't sound like you have, but I speak to a lot of founders who find it really hard to give up control of things, to hire someone else to take something on. But it sounds like you're okay with that.
I'm
Is
generally
that something you sort of learned, or was it something you kind of knew from the beginning?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I'm definitely still working on that for sure. I think it's just that like I want things to succeed, so I'll just pick up something if I see that it's not been done. But that also prevents scalability. And that's very obvious and clear. And I only have so many hours in the day, and so many things that I can focus on. And so it just becomes like a survival requirement at some point. And then also, like, my team is better than me at most things. Like, I feel like my job is to do something poorly enough to build like a process around it, and then hire someone to fill that role and do it properly. The company is definitely my baby. I definitely put all my emotions into it, and everyone knows I would do basically anything to make this successful. But they're like my team is better than me at things. Like my head of product is better than me at product management. And so I'm totally cool with giving him the reins on dealing with that. I think there are some things that I like to maintain control over, obviously. A big one is hiring and people, because I think that's very much my job, and it's my job to create a successful team. But yeah, I mean, if you're hiring people right, then they should be better than you at a lot of different things.
Looking at the future then, where do you plan to take Strella in the next year or so?
Yeah, so we generally have three axes of expansion. So we've got supply chain segment, commodity, and then geography. So we're just expanding right now across the commodity axis. So we've done apples, pears, and bananas. Next up are avocados and mangoes, diving into some citrus and stone fruit as well, and then tackling the big golden child, which is berries.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many berries have developed mold in our fridge. So looking at the next year then, with those three expansion areas, do you feel like there's anything that could stop that from happening? Any challenges that you see coming up?
Well, the biggest challenge that we always have working in with large enterprises is just their long sales cycle. A Walmart takes forever to close, and so for a startup, that's always just like a tremendous challenge is being able to survive long enough to get these deals across the line. And so I anticipate that will continue. I think another big thing for us right now is scaling. So now we've gotten a couple of very giant customers and big contracts, and now we're a really small team, and we have to make sure that we're maintaining quality as we roll out across significant chunks of the market.
I'm curious, what would you think would have to change for Strella to double its impact, double its revenue without having to double your headcount?
I think just becoming more automated, more efficient. So for example, I'll give one really brief example. Our banana ripening model is AI, it's all automated. Well, we still check just to make sure because it's a new product in the market, and so we have a human checking every single time. And so as soon as we can stop doing that, and we are sure that we have specific confidence in certain methods, then we can stop doing that and we can continue to scale in a way that's better and more efficient.
Then are there any growth initiatives that you should be tackling but haven't been able to prioritize yet?
Yeah, I think for myself, I say it over and over again. I think my job should be new product development, and kind of sitting and thinking about the pipeline for future work. But honestly, a lot of the time for me today is spent on daily operations. And so I would like to kind of hand over a lot of the daily work at some point and just be really focused on building the next banana ripening thing.
Finally, last question for you. If you had one piece of advice to give to another founder in sustainability, what would it be?
It sounds corny, but I would say stick to your dream and your vision and figure out how to communicate it the best way that you can to your customers and share that excitement that you have for the problem that you're working on. But I think maintaining that kind of core of why you're working on it and why you care so much about it throughout the entire journey and not losing sight of that is really, really important.
Really appreciate that, Katherine. How can people get in touch with Strella, learn more about it? Yeah, get involved.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Katherine Sizov. And then we also have a website with an email address in the footer if you want to reach out over email. info@strella.ai.
Katherine, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I think this has been a great conversation. Really insightful pieces there for people. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.